So why don't we start with just coming to perhaps an understanding of how our panelists here see blended learning. It's a term that I know over the past several years has confused some of you, or perhaps it's not as well understood as it is. We know that single malt Scotch is better than blended Scotch, and perhaps some of you are bringing that same understanding to blended learning. So we hope to demystify that here tonight. Blended is good, okay? So in any event, why don't we just start down at, with Brenda, and maybe Brenda, tell us a little bit about what blended learning looks like up at Queen's.
Okay, so we use a definition of blended learning. A very general definition is that it's the thoughtful and purposeful combination of face-to-face learning and e-learning. And I think the best thing I could do is describe to you what a course looks like in that kind of model. So I don't know if any of you went to Queen's, but if you did, you probably took Psych 100. So first year psychology is our biggest course on campus. And traditionally it was taught as a lecture course. So what does it look like now? The way it looks now is the students have three components. One is online, one is one hour lecture a week, and one is a small group learning experience. So how it might actually work, for example, if they were looking at how to design a research study. They'd do some online work, interactive materials, some reading, some videos, some comprehension quizzes, and understand the basics of what a variable is and what reliability is and all of those kinds of things, validity, how to make a research study. Then when they have that one hour lecture, it's still a big lecture, but it's not about basic transmission of information anymore. What would happen is one of the profs comes in and talks about his research, and he says, I'm trying to answer the question about do athletes have a higher tolerance for pain? And in order to examine that question, I design a research study. And then he explains what his variables are and why it's ethical to subject people to pain and that kind of thing, and gives them a living example of those terms and concepts that they've studied through their online work. And then the third component is actually the most important in the course, and that's where these 1,800 students actually meet in groups of 5 in a classroom of 30, and what they do is apply what they've learned to some kind of activity. In this case, they come in with a good research study and a bad research study, and collaboratively they've got to improve that bad research study proposal until it's a good one. So they actually have to apply everything they've learned through that unit.
A typical week now for a student is they watch about an hour of video covering the same concepts that we used to take 3 hours to cover in lecture. So by the end of that hour of learning, they have a basic idea of the topic that was covered for the week. Then in 3 separate lecture hours, they come and basically do exercises in class. And the way these usually run is we give out worksheets. The students work individually on a small problem. And then before we tell them what the answer is, there's all sorts of strategies for making sure they're engaged. One of them is convince your neighbor that you're right. And so there's always a buzz of discussion, and we have our 2-minute mark, and we tell, okay, everybody start collaborating, figure out which answer is best, why is it best, and so on. While they're working on it for 2 minutes individually, and for another 2 minutes convincing each other that which one is right, an instructor and several TAs are walking around the lecture hall helping anybody who has a question. And this is actually way better than office hours, because students have each other to talk to, so they get over the hurdles themselves. It's easier to meet somebody, so they don't sit alone in a corner if they're feeling socially awkward or shy or whatever. And we can teach to the concepts that students are confused about.
So here at Greenwood, blended learning looks different in different courses. So in grade 9 geography, for example, blended learning is used to help students assess where they're at and help the teachers assess where the students are at within one lesson. So the lesson might start off with all the students in the room doing a quick 5-10 minute little, traditional lesson with the teacher at the board. And then the students will do an online quiz or assessment, and the teachers will see the results of that. The results of that will help the teacher push the students into one of a few different avenues. So some students might have shown a strong mastery of that concept that was covered, and they'll get pushed into an avenue where they'll then work with other students in the room to apply that concept. Some students might show on the quiz that they didn't really get it and they need to look at it in a different way. So there might be another small group workshop with the teacher to work through that content. There might be a video that they watch to work through that content, or an online simulation. In terms of what happens in the classroom then, the students can work through that material at their own pace and in their own way and through their own path.